Montana Territory, 1872. The jagged peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains stood like silent sentinels against the fading light, watching over a frontier still raw from the echoes of civil war. The land demanded much from those who dared claim it: blood, sweat, and sometimes the belief that true connection was a luxury no frontiersman could afford. Isaac Callahan had long ago accepted this as gospel truth, burying dreams of hearth and home beneath the practical demands of survival. At 25, Isaac had already lived several lifetimes by frontier reckoning. His lean frame carried the quiet strength earned through years of driving cattle across unforgiving terrain, his hands calloused from rope and reins. Handsome in an unassuming way, with clear blue eyes that missed little, and a jawline often shadowed with a day's growth of beard, he moved through the world with the cautious confidence of a man who trusted his own capabilities but little else. The Diamond K Ranch had been his home for 3 seasons now, the closest thing to putting down roots he'd allowed himself since leaving Tennessee at 17. The ranch owner, Old Man Keller, valued Isaac's way with horses and his unflinching work ethic, paying him better than most cowboys could expect. But Isaac kept largely to himself, maintaining a careful distance from the camaraderie that flowed freely among the other hands. "A man relies on others out here, he's just setting himself up for disappointment," he often told himself while watching the others share stories around the evening fire. The frontier's no place for soft hearts. It was a belief that had served him well enough after watching his father die broken and penniless despite years of loyal service to a cattle baron back east. It was the reason he kept his savings sewn into his saddle blanket rather than trusted to banks or partners. It was why, despite invitations, he rarely joined the other hands on their trips into Helena, preferring the honest company of horses to the complicated dealings of people. Yet for all his determination to need nothing and no one, Isaac couldn't quite silence the hollow ache that sometimes woke him in the darkest hours before dawn, a persistent sense that survival alone wasn't quite living. The Montana spring had arrived fitfully that year, alternating between sudden warmth and biting cold that kept the mountain passes treacherous well into May. Isaac had been dispatched alone to check fencing along the ranch's eastern boundary, a task expected to take 3 days at most. The work suited him: methodical, solitary, useful. On the second afternoon, as clouds gathered threateningly overhead, he spotted something that didn't belong among the endless waves of prairie grass, a splash of deep blue fabric fluttering against the tawny landscape. Drawing his horse to a halt, Isaac squinted against the sharpening wind. The fabric belonged to a dress, and the dress to a young woman who appeared to be struggling with a damaged wagon wheel, her slender form bent against the mounting gale. His first instinct was to ride on. Travelers in trouble were common enough on the frontier, and getting involved inevitably led to complications. But as the first fat raindrops began to fall, something about her solitary struggle against the elements compelled him forward. "Miss, you need assistance," he called, approaching cautiously to avoid startling her. She straightened, pushing back a strand of golden blonde hair that had escaped from beneath her bonnet. At perhaps 20 years of age, her face held both the softness of youth and a determined set to her jaw that spoke of inner strength. Her blue traveling dress, though quality made, showed the dust and wear of long travel. "Thank goodness," she said, relief flooding her features. "I thought I might be stranded out here until Judgment Day." As he dismounted, she introduced herself as Zara Whittaker, traveling from Pennsylvania to join her uncle's household in Helena after the recent passing of her mother. Her hired driver had abandoned her 2 days earlier, taking the best horse and most of her belongings after an argument about payment. "I thought I could manage the remaining distance myself," she explained, frustration evident in her voice. "I've driven wagons before, but not through country like this. The wheel struck a rock about an hour ago." Isaac examined the damaged wheel with practiced eyes. The terrain had claimed many wagon wheels over the years, and he'd learned to make field repairs out of necessity. "It can be fixed," he said, "but not quickly and not in this weather." The rain was falling steadily now, and the distant rumble of thunder warned of worse to come. The nearest shelter was his own camp, established near a small stand of cottonwoods beside a creek about 2 miles back. "Miss Whittaker, I suggest we secure your wagon and return to my camp until this passes. I can bring you back tomorrow to make repairs." Hesitation flickered across her face. A single woman alone with a strange man was precisely the situation young ladies were warned against. Isaac recognized her dilemma and stepped back, giving her space. I understand your concern, miss. I work for the Diamond K Ranch. My name's Isaac Callahan. I can't in good conscience leave you here with a storm coming, but the choice is yours. A particularly sharp crack of thunder seemed to make the decision for her. Very well, Mr. Callahan, I accept your offer of assistance. They worked quickly to gather her most essential belongings and secure the wagon as best they could. The rain intensified as Isaac helped her mount his horse, then led them on foot back toward his camp. By the time they reached the shelter of the cottonwoods, both were thoroughly drenched. Isaac worked efficiently to reinforce his simple canvas lean-to and build up the fire while Zara huddled beneath the shelter, watching him with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. You seem quite capable, Mr. Callahan, she observed as he managed to produce a reasonably hot pot of coffee despite the adverse conditions. Out here, you learn what needs doing or you don't last, he replied, handing her a tin cup. Been on my own since I was 17, you pick things up. And yet you stop to help a stranger. Isaac shifted uncomfortably at the implied question. Wouldn't be right to leave anyone facing a storm like this. Some would have, she said simply. As the evening wore on and the storm raged around them, Isaac found himself uncharacteristically talkative. There was something about Zara Whittaker that invited confidence, perhaps the way she listened with genuine interest or asked questions that suggested she valued his answers. She spoke of her journey west, a decision made out of both necessity and a desire to escape the suffocating expectations that had defined her life in Pennsylvania. After Mother died, I had few options. Marriage to the son of my father's business partner was considered the most suitable arrangement. And you disagreed, Isaac observed. A flash of determination crossed her face. I refused to be treated as property to be transferred from one household to another. My uncle has offered me a position teaching at the school he's establishing in Helena. It's not independence exactly, but it's a beginning. Isaac found himself admiring her courage. Few young women of her evident refinement would undertake such a journey, especially alone. As the night deepened and the storm gradually abated, they talked of homes left behind and the uncertain promise of the frontier. For the first time in years, Isaac spoke of his father and the hard lessons of his childhood. In turn, Zara revealed the complex grief of losing her mother while simultaneously fighting for the right to determine her own future. My brothers and stepfather believe they know what's best for me, she said quietly. They cannot understand why I'd choose uncertainty over security. Security's an illusion anyway, Isaac responded. Out here, that's clearer than most places. When dawn finally broke clear and bright, Isaac was surprised to realize he'd spent the entire night in conversation. More surprising still was the reluctance he felt at the prospect of returning Zara to her wagon and continuing on their separate ways. The repair took most of the morning, with Zara proving herself more than capable of assisting. Her delicate hands soon smudged with grease as she helped hold parts in place while Isaac worked. You're not what I expected, he admitted as they secured the repaired wheel. A helpless Eastern lady in need of rescuing, there was humor in her voice, something like that. And you're not the dangerous frontier ruffian I was warned about, she countered with a slight smile. My stepfather painted quite a terrifying picture of Western men. Isaac found himself smiling in return, a rare enough occurrence that it felt almost foreign. Most of us are just trying to make our way, same as anyone. With the wagon repaired and the weather clear, there was no practical reason to delay Zara's journey to Helena. Yet Isaac found himself reluctant to send her on alone through country still dangerous for solitary travelers. Helena's another 2 days' travel, he said as they stood beside the wagon. If you permit it, I'd feel better seeing you safely there. The relief that crossed her face was answer enough. I would welcome the company, Mr. Callahan, and the protection. What began as a simple act of frontier courtesy evolved over those 2 days into something neither had anticipated. They established an easy rhythm of travel, sharing the driving duties and setting up camp together as if they'd done so for years rather than hours. Isaac found himself noticing things he normally wouldn't, the way sunlight caught in Zara's hair, turning it to molten gold. The musical quality of her laugh when he recounted stories of cattle drives gone wrong, the fierce intelligence behind her questions about the land and its people. For her part, Zara observed the contradictions in the quiet cowboy, the gentle hands that could both calm frightened horses and efficiently dispatch a rattlesnake that ventured too close to their camp. The careful distance he maintained with most people contrasted with the surprising openness he showed with her. On the evening before they would reach Helena, as they sat beside their small fire watching stars emerge in the vast Montana sky, Zara broke a comfortable silence with an unexpected question. Why do you keep yourself so separate from others, Isaac? He considered deflecting but found himself answering honestly. Learned early that depending on people is a quick way to disappointment. My father gave 20 years of loyalty to a man who discarded him when he was no longer useful, died with nothing but bitter regrets. So you decided to knight no one. Simpler that way. She studied him across the firelight. Simpler perhaps, but lonely too, I would think. Before he could respond, she continued softly, I understand the impulse. After my father died when I was 12, my mother remarried quickly for security, she said. My stepfather is not a cruel man, but he sees women as dependents to be managed, not people with their own minds. My brothers adopted his view. I promised myself I would never be so vulnerable, never need anyone's approval or protection. Yet here you are, heading to your uncle's home. Yes, she acknowledged. Because I've realized there's a difference between dependence and connection. We all need the latter, I think, even in the wilderness. Her words lingered in Isaac's mind long after they'd retired to their respective sleeping arrangements, she in the wagon, he beneath it as propriety demanded. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider whether what he'd taken as wisdom might instead be fear disguised as independence. They reached Helena shortly after noon the following day. The growing frontier town bustled with activity, miners, merchants, settlers, and cowboys creating a tapestry of frontier life that contrasted sharply with the solitude of the open range. Zara directed them to a substantial home on the outskirts of town, where her uncle, a silver-haired gentleman named Elijah Whittaker, received them with evident relief and gratitude. We've been frantic with worry, my dear, he told Zara, embracing her warmly. Your letter said to expect you nearly a week ago. I was about to organize a search party. I encountered some difficulties on the journey, she explained, then gestured to Isaac. Mr. Callahan came to my rescue. I quite literally might not have survived without his assistance. The older man turned to Isaac with genuine appreciation. Then our family owes you a significant debt, young man. Please, you must stay for dinner at least. Isaac's instinct was to politely decline and return to the familiar solitude of the trail. Yet when he looked at Zara, something in her expression made the thought of immediate departure surprisingly painful. I'd be honored, sir, he found himself saying. The Whittaker home revealed a family of means and education. Books lined the walls of the sitting room, and the furnishings, while not ostentatious, spoke of Eastern refinement adapted to Western practicality. Isaac felt decidedly out of place in his trail-worn clothing, but Elijah Whittaker treated him with genuine respect rather than condescension. Over dinner, Isaac learned that Elijah had come west 5 years earlier after losing his wife, driven by both grief and opportunity. He'd established a successful freight business and was now investing in Helena's future through various civic projects, including the school where Zara would teach. My brother William never approved of my Western adventure, Elijah told them. I'm frankly surprised he allowed Zara to join me. He didn't precisely allow it, Zara admitted. My departure was rather more precipitous than planned. A shadow crossed her face, and Isaac suspected there was more to the story than she'd shared even with him. Before he could wonder further, a knock at the door announced the arrival of a telegram messenger. The message clearly disturbed Elijah, who excused himself to compose a reply. When he returned, his expression was troubled. It seems your brothers and stepfather are more distressed by your departure than anticipated, Zara. They've taken a train west and will arrive within the week. Zara paled visibly. They've come to take me back. So it would appear. William writes that you left against explicit instructions and in violation of an arrangement he had made for your future. He seems to believe I've somehow encouraged what he terms your reckless defiance. I'm 20 years old, Zara said, her voice tight with controlled anger. I'm not a child to be commanded, nor property to be bartered into marriage. Isaac felt distinctly that he was intruding on a private family matter, yet couldn't help but feel protective of Zara. Perhaps I should take my leave, he said, rising. No, please, Zara surprised him by saying. In fact, I'd like to show you Helena tomorrow if you're willing. You've traveled all this way to ensure my safety. You should see something of the town before returning to your ranch. There was something in her request that felt like more than simple courtesy, and Isaac found himself agreeing despite the knowledge that he should be heading back to the Diamond K. That night in the comfortable guest room provided by Elijah, Isaac wrestled with unfamiliar emotions. In less than a week, Zara Whittaker had somehow breached defenses he'd spent years constructing. The prospect of returning to his solitary existence suddenly seemed less like freedom and more like empty habit. The following days unfolded with unexpected sweetness. Isaac sent word to the Diamond K explaining his delay, then allowed Zara to show him Helena through her eyes, the promise and possibility she saw in this frontier town that was gradually transitioning from mining camp to proper city. They visited the site of her future school, still under construction but taking shape through her uncle's patronage. Watching her face animate with plans for her students, Isaac glimpsed a future he'd never allowed himself to envision, one where purpose extended beyond mere survival. "You'll be good at this," he told her as they stood amid the half-built schoolhouse. "These children will be fortunate to have you as their teacher." "If I'm permitted to stay," she replied, the shadow of her family's imminent arrival dimming her enthusiasm. Their time together acquired a bittersweet quality, both aware that everything would change when her family arrived. Yet neither spoke directly of what had grown between them, a connection that had somehow taken root in the harshest of conditions and now flourished despite all logic. Isaac found himself sharing more of his hopes and doubts than he ever had with another soul. Zara, in turn, revealed the complicated history that had driven her west, including her stepfather's arrangement to marry her to a man 30 years her senior in exchange for financial considerations. "My mother would never have agreed to such a match," she confided as they walked along the banks of the creek that ran near town. "She married for security after my father's death, but she always encouraged me to seek something more." "And what is it you're seeking?" Isaac asked, genuinely curious. She considered the question seriously before answering. "A life that's mine to shape, work that matters, and perhaps," she hesitated, then continued more softly, "someone who sees me as I am, not as they wish me to be." Their gazes met, and for a moment, all the unspoken feelings between them seemed to crystallize into something tangible, yet still fragile. Isaac found himself taking her hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable to him only days earlier. "I see you, Zara Whittaker," he said simply. The arrival of the eastbound train 4 days later shattered their fragile idyll. Zara's stepfather, Gordon Manning, proved to be exactly as she had described, a man accustomed to authority and unaccustomed to having his decisions questioned. Accompanying him were Zara's 2 older brothers, both cut from similar cloth though younger. The confrontation in Elijah Whittaker's sitting room was immediate and heated. "This impulsive behavior ends now," Manning declared after perfunctory greetings. "Your brothers and I have come to escort you home, where arrangements for your future have already been made." Zara stood her ground with remarkable composure. "I've made my own arrangements, as I informed you before leaving. I will be teaching at the school Uncle Elijah is establishing." The oldest brother, Thomas, interjected with obvious disdain, "Playing schoolteacher in this wilderness." "Nonsense, you've been indulged in these childish notions long enough, Zara. Mr. Hargrove has been more than patient, but even his tolerance has limits." "Mr. Hargrove," she replied evenly, "has no claim on me, nor will he ever." The younger brother, James, noticed Isaac standing slightly apart. "And who is this?" he demanded. "This is Mr. Isaac Callahan," Elijah explained. "He assisted Zara when she encountered difficulties on her journey. We owe him a debt of gratitude." The looks directed at Isaac made it clear that gratitude was the last thing on their minds. Manning surveyed him with undisguised suspicion. "A cowhand, I presume. How convenient that you should be available to assist an unaccompanied young lady." Isaac felt anger rising but kept his voice level. "She needed help, I provided it." "I'm sure you did," Thomas said, the insinuation clear in his tone. Zara's cheeks flushed with anger. "Mr. Callahan saved my life and has been nothing but honorable. I won't have him insulted in this way." "You are in no position to dictate terms, young lady," Manning responded coldly. "Your behavior has already caused enough scandal. Pack your things, we leave on tomorrow's train." "I am not leaving," Zara stated firmly. "I am of legal age and I have made my decision." The confrontation escalated from there, with threats of cutting off her inheritance, social ostracism, and even legal action. Throughout it all, Isaac watched as Zara maintained her resolve despite the emotional assault, her voice occasionally trembling but never surrendering. When Manning finally threatened to have Isaac arrested on fabricated charges of impropriety, Elijah Whittaker intervened decisively. That is quite enough, the older man said, his voice cutting through the tension. This is my home, and you will conduct yourselves accordingly. Zara is indeed of legal age, and while you may not approve of her choices, they are hers to make. As for Mr. Callahan, he is my guest, and has conducted himself with nothing but integrity. The standoff continued, but with Elijah's support, Zara held firm in her refusal to return east. A tense truce was established, with her family agreeing to remain in Helena for a week to discuss matters reasonably. After they had been shown to their accommodations at the hotel, Zara found Isaac preparing to leave. "You're going?" she asked, dismay evident in her voice. "I think it's best," he replied, securing his saddlebags. "My presence is only making things more difficult for you." "On the contrary, you're the only thing making this bearable." She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "Please don't leave because of them." "It's not just that," Isaac admitted. "Watching you stand up to your family like that, it made me realize I've been hiding from something similar." "What do you mean?" He struggled to articulate thoughts that were only now becoming clear to him. "I've been using my father's disappointment as an excuse to avoid risking anything real, telling myself I was being smart, independent, but really I was just afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of ending up like him." Broken by hope that didn't pan out, he looked at her directly. "But then I met you, and for the first time the risk of hoping seems worth taking." The words hung between them, more revealing than any Isaac had ever spoken. Zara's response was to step forward and place her hand against his cheek, a gesture so gentle it nearly undid him. "Then stay," she said simply, "at least until we see what comes of all this." He covered her hand with his own. "Your family already thinks the worst of me. All the more reason not to prove them right by disappearing when things become difficult." The week that followed tested both of them in unexpected ways. Manning and Zara's brothers employed every tactic from emotional manipulation to outright threats in their attempts to persuade her to return east. They also made no secret of their disdain for Isaac, treating him with barely concealed contempt when they couldn't ignore him altogether. For his part, Isaac struggled against his instinct to withdraw from conflict. Every interaction with Zara's family confirmed his long-held belief that emotional entanglements led only to pain. Yet each time he considered returning to the Diamond K, he found himself unable to leave Zara facing her battles alone. Matters came to a head when Thomas discovered Isaac and Zara in what he deemed a compromising position, though they had merely been sitting together on Elijah's porch, talking quietly as evening fell. "This is beyond scandal," Thomas declared loudly enough to draw the attention of passers-by. "A lady of your breeding, carrying on with a common cowhand in public view." Zara rose to her feet, fury in every line of her body. "Mr. Callahan is worth 10 of you, Thomas. He has shown more honor and decency in the short time I've known him than you have in a lifetime of supposed propriety." "You've clearly lost your mind," her brother retorted. "First refusing an advantageous match, then running away like a thief in the night, and now this infatuation with a saddle tramp." Isaac had maintained his composure through days of similar insults, but something in him snapped at the hurt these words inflicted on Zara. He stepped forward, positioning himself between them. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet but carrying a dangerous edge. "You've insulted both your sister and me without cause or right. I've respected your family connection to Miss Whittaker, but my patience has limits." Thomas's face flushed with anger. "Are you threatening me, Cowboy?" "I'm asking you to conduct yourself like a gentleman, though evidence suggests that might be beyond your capabilities." The confrontation might have become physical had Elijah not emerged from the house at that moment. With firm authority, he separated the men and ordered Thomas to return to the hotel to cool his temper. Later that evening, as Isaac helped Elijah repair a broken porch step, a task he'd undertaken partly to channel his frustrated energy, the older man offered unexpected insight. "They're afraid, you know," he said, handing Isaac a nail. "Not just of losing control of Zara, but of what her independence represents. If she can forge her own path, their entire worldview is threatened." Isaac drove the nail with perhaps more force than necessary. "Doesn't excuse how they're treating her." "No, it doesn't," Elijah agreed, "but understanding why people behave as they do can sometimes help us respond more effectively." He paused in his work, studying Isaac thoughtfully. "You care for my niece?" It wasn't a question, but Isaac answered anyway. "Yes, sir, more than I thought possible." And your intentions? Isaac hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. Until a week ago, I'd convinced myself that the solitary life was all I wanted or deserved. Meeting Zara has changed everything, but I have little to offer beyond a cowboy's wages and a heart that's still learning how to hope. Elijah nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. Hope is no small thing on the frontier, Mr. Callahan. Neither is a good heart. He resumed his work, adding casually, Did I mention I've been looking for someone to manage the horse breeding operation I'm starting north of town? The position would include a small house and a stake in the business. Isaac looked up sharply, surprised by this apparent non sequitur. Sir. Just something to consider, Elijah said with the ghost of a smile. Now hand me that hammer if you would. The following day, Manning made his final play. He arrived at Elijah's home with a sheriff's deputy and papers he claimed gave him legal authority over Zara's person and inheritance. Your mothers will place you under my guardianship until marriage or your 25th birthday, he told Zara triumphantly. The law is quite clear. The sheriff examined the documents with obvious discomfort. These appear to be Pennsylvania legal papers, Mr. Manning. I'm not certain of their validity in Montana territory. The law recognizes such arrangements across jurisdictions, Sheriff, Manning insisted. I'm simply reclaiming a wayward dependent. Elijah, who had been reviewing the documents over the sheriff's shoulder, spoke up decisively. These papers refer specifically to the administration of property left by Catherine Whittaker Manning. They say nothing about personal guardianship of an adult woman. The sheriff looked relieved to have this interpretation offered. That does appear to be the case, Mr. Manning. Miss Whittaker seems to be of legal age, and while you may have authority over her inheritance, you cannot compel her physical return. Manning's face darkened with fury. This is outrageous. I will not be thwarted by frontier legalities. If necessary, I will obtain further documentation from Pennsylvania. You're welcome to try, Elijah replied calmly. In the meantime, Zara remains under my roof by her own choice. As Manning and the sheriff departed, the former making threats of legal consequences, Isaac noticed something he hadn't seen before, a flicker of uncertainty beneath Zara's composed exterior. When they were finally alone, he addressed it directly. What is it that you're not saying? She hesitated before answering. The inheritance my stepfather controls, it's substantial. It includes not only my mother's personal fortune, but also property that's been in my father's family for generations. I always intended to use it to establish my independence eventually. And without it? Without it, I have only what I can earn as a teacher. She looked at him directly. I've been raised in privilege, Isaac. I don't know if I'm strong enough for the life that awaits without those resources. It was the first time he'd seen her doubt herself, and it awakened something fierce in him, a certainty that had been growing since the moment they'd met. You are the strongest person I've ever known, he told her. You faced down a Montana storm, an arduous journey, and now your family's disapproval, all to build the life you want. Money doesn't make that kind of courage. She smiled faintly. Even so, I've never had to truly fend for myself. Perhaps they're right that I'm being childishly impractical. Do you want to go back? He asked, needing to hear her answer. No, she said without hesitation. I want to teach. I want to help build something here. She faltered, then continued more softly, I want a chance to discover what might exist between us, but I won't pretend the road ahead doesn't frighten me. Isaac took her hands in his, an intimacy he would never have dared before knowing her. Fear isn't weakness, Zara, it's just the price of doing something that matters. The following morning, Zara's family made their final attempt to force her compliance. They arrived at Elijah's home with an ultimatum. Return east willingly or be publicly denounced as a woman of questionable virtue who had fled her family to pursue an inappropriate relationship with a common laborer. Your reputation will be irreparably damaged, Manning warned. No respectable community will accept you as a teacher. Your uncle's school will fail before it opens. Is that what you want? Isaac, who had been working in Elijah's stable, entered the house just in time to hear this threat. The fury that rose in him was unlike anything he'd experienced before, cold and clarifying rather than hot and confusing. You would destroy your own daughter's reputation to control her, he asked, his contempt evident. Manning turned on him with venom. This is none of your concern, Cowboy. You've interfered enough in family matters. It became my concern when you threatened someone I care about, Isaac replied evenly. And if we're discussing reputations, perhaps the good people of Helena might be interested to know that a respected Eastern businessman attempted to sell his stepdaughter into marriage to settle his debts. The stunned silence that followed confirmed Isaac's suspicion that there was more to the advantageous match than had been admitted. Zara looked at her stepfather with new understanding. Is that true? Was my marriage to Mr. Hargrove arranged to satisfy some financial obligation? Manning's silence was damning. Thomas attempted to intervene, his tone conciliatory for the first time. It wasn't quite so mercenary, Zara. Hargrove was willing to forgive certain investments that had gone awry in exchange for your hand. It would have secured the family's position. My hand in exchange for debt forgiveness, Zara repeated, her voice hollow, and you wonder why I fled. James, the younger brother who had remained largely silent throughout the confrontations, finally spoke. I told you she deserved the truth, he said to his father and brother. This deception has gone far enough. The family unity fractured visibly, with James moving to stand beside his sister. I'm sorry, Zara. I should have spoken sooner. This unexpected support seemed to strengthen Zara's resolve. Standing straighter, she addressed her stepfather with quiet dignity. I release any claim to my inheritance, she declared. In exchange, I ask only that you leave Helena and allow me to build my life as I see fit. Manning scoffed. You cannot simply release your inheritance, the law can be satisfied with a formal renunciation, Elijah interrupted, producing a document from his desk. I took the liberty of having this drawn up yesterday. Once signed and witnessed, it transfers all of Zara's rights under her mother's will to your administration until her 25th birthday. After that, the matter becomes moot. The legal maneuver clearly caught Manning off guard. He examined the document with narrowed eyes. This appears comprehensive, but why would you surrender your fortune so easily? Zara's answer was simple and devastating. Because freedom to determine my own future is worth more than any inheritance. The standoff ended with unexpected abruptness. Faced with Zara's unshakable resolve, supported by both her uncle and brother James, Manning finally recognized defeat. The document was signed, witnessed by the town's notary, and the family departed on the eastbound train the following day, though James chose to remain for an extended visit with his sister and uncle. In the quiet aftermath, Isaac found Zara sitting alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of amber and gold. Do you regret it? He asked, taking the seat beside her. Surrendering the inheritance, she considered the question seriously before shaking her head. It was never truly mine while he controlled it, and what I've gained is beyond price. Your freedom. That, yes. And something else I never expected to find on the frontier. She turned to look at him directly, the chance to discover what it means to care for someone who sees me exactly as I am. Isaac took her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become in so short a time. I've been thinking about your uncle's offer to manage his horse breeding operation. Have you? There was careful hope in her voice. It would mean staying in Helena, building something permanent. He paused, gathering courage for words he'd never imagined speaking. It would mean having a future to offer someone if she were interested in sharing it. Zara's smile bloomed slowly, transforming her face with joy. She might be very interested indeed. Even though that future won't include Eastern comforts or the privileges you've known. I've discovered that privilege is a poor substitute for genuine connection, she replied, and that security isn't found in wealth or social position, but in knowing yourself and being known by another. As twilight deepened around them, Isaac finally allowed himself to acknowledge the truth that had been growing since he'd first spotted a splash of blue fabric against the Montana prairie. The frontier wasn't a place devoid of connection, it was where he had finally found the courage to reach for it. I love you, Zara Whittaker, he said, the words both terrifying and liberating. I think I've loved you since that first night when you told me there's a difference between dependence and connection. Her answer was to close the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that promised a future neither had believed possible before finding each other. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Isaac Callahan and Zara Whittaker were married in the newly completed schoolhouse where she had already begun teaching Helena's children. Elijah Whittaker gave the bride away, and to everyone's surprise, James had returned from Pennsylvania with their youngest sister in tow, both having decided that the Montana frontier offered freedoms worth the hardships. The horse breeding operation was showing promise, with Isaac's natural affinity for the animals translating into early success. The small house on the property had been transformed by Zara's touch into a true home, modest by Eastern standards but rich in the warmth that comes from shared purpose and genuine affection. As they stood together on the porch of their home that evening, watching the first stars appear above the mountains, Isaac reflected on the false belief that had shaped so much of his life, that the frontier was a place for solitary survival rather than connection. "I spent years believing that needing no one was strength," he told his wife, his arm around her waist. "When really it was just fear wearing a convincing disguise." Zara leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, and I believed independence meant standing completely alone. "We were both wrong in the same way. And right in finding each other," he added, turning to kiss her as the Montana night enfolded them in its vast, star-filled promise. No longer a harsh wilderness to be endured alone, but a future to be built together.